Appeals meeting open. We will first start with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by an invocation. Would someone volunteer for the Pledge of Allegiance? Lead it. Oh, okay, Bob, thank you. And I'll take on the invocation. System, sound, capabilities, opportunity for Ms. Todd Hill. I don't see minutes, so I'm assuming that they'll be drafted at the end of this. You might want to send me a draft before you are done. There are some things that I want to make sure are in there.
Okay.
So, no approval of minutes. The public hearing is done. Old business continuation from the meeting of the 27th regarding variance request case number Z 2024-00196, request by Mr. Dwayne Carabin. No other business to follow.
Yeah, Mr. Don. Mr. Dines, do you have the presentation? Thank you. Members of the board, I'm Matthew Smolek, County Administrator for King George County. This is a continuation from the August 27th meeting. So I just want to let you know some of the support staff that I have here, some direction that I was given from the board at the last meeting. Mr. Kenny Vaughn, our certified zoning official, Ms. Kelly LeDuc, Director of Community Development, Angela and Ryan Ferogi, two professional engineers, work for the county. I have Mary Stewart, law clerk, and Senator Richard Stewart, our county attorney representing us. And also we have Max representing the BZ up on the end. So thank you for coming out tonight. So we do have some new board members here that were not present at the August 27th. So Mr. Chairman, if you will allow, I just got a brief recap of how we got to where we are tonight, if that's okay with you. And additionally, I did want to say, this is a land use issue, but I know there were some talks about environmental issues, more specifically having somebody here from DEQ. We could not get DEQ, but we do have written confirmation from them, correspondence. Again, this is a land use issue, but if you want to talk about environmental issues, we do have correspondence for you all and for the applicant with Mr. Moore from DEQ.
The request, that's what I'd like to see in the minutes, was made just because one of the board members had a lot of questions about the environmental impact side. Not that we would influence the decision making because we have rules for that and we know what they are. But I did want to give them the freedom to talk with someone in a knowledgeable subject matter expert should that be required.
Right, and we have that. We have two professional engineers here per what the BZA requested. So the original request, this is what the original request came into the county for section 5265D2 of the King George zoning and subdivision ordinance for the construction of a 40 by 50 detached garage with a 15-foot overhang and the landward 50 foot of the RPA buffer. Total encroachment in the RPA is 4,950 square feet on tax map 18B1, parcel 13, 2.02 acre zoned A2. Again, this was the initial request that was presented at the August 27th meeting. So just a little bit of history. Back in January, the applicant had applied for a building permit with the county. That application was denied due to an accessory structure being located in the RPA buffer. The applicant applied for a variance in accordance with 5.210 of the King George code, which is why we are here. This is a variance hearing in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. There was a public held August 27th in this very room. And then staff was directed to hold a work session with the applicant with staff, which was done on September 17th. Several different alternatives were discussed. One was presented by the applicant, two were presented by the county, and we have those. You have those in front of you. I will go over them in my presentation. And then the applicant provided their new plan to the county on September 27th. And as I mentioned, we also have environmental advice from DEQ received October 1 per the board. So this particular section of the code talks about the 100-foot buffer. Really, why do we have this? The RPA buffer, as we know, we're in Tidewater, Virginia. Any perennial water feature, any connected, waterway, stream, soil has a 100-foot buffer to protect the Chesapeake Bay. So this is the purpose of a variance. So again, we are here for a variance. What is the purpose of a variance? It's to allow for a reasonable deviation from the provisions of this ordinance regulating the shape.
Can you back up just one slide, please? Just want to finish reading. Thank you.
So the purpose of a variance is to allow for reasonable deviation from the provisions of the King George Ordinance regulating the shape, size, or area of a lot or parcel of land in size, height, area, bulk, or in this case, highlighted the location of a building or structure where the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The property is currently being used as a single-family dwelling with a garage in the single-family dwelling. Other relief or remedy is not available. We're going to provide you with some examples of other relief or remedy for based on what the applicant originally proposed. And then such a need for a variance would not be shared generally by other properties. So do other properties in this area share this constraint, i.e. do neighboring properties also have RPA? The answer to that is yes, they do along Machotic Creek, as is a lot of King George County. So this is an aerial map, the property 16012 Machotic Drive with the white arrow. The white arrow is pointing to the approximate location of the proposed garage. This is a street view from the end of the cul-de-sac looking back towards the house on the waterway. So this was the original plan that was presented that the public hearing was held on. And you can see that it's a 2,000 square foot garage with an overhang, 4,950 square feet of land disturbance inside the RPA buffer. And I got the next couple slides. And again, these are just a rehash, but I want to get us up to speed how we got to where we are tonight. So this is the limits of the 100-foot RPA buffer. You can see the original location. And then this is the area outside of the RPA. This is really where we left the August 27th meeting, and the board directed staff and the applicant to hold a work session. So at that work session, the applicant provided this, and this is what was provided electronically and submitted to the county staff late last week. Essentially, the garage, I think it was a discussion where they just turned it a little bit. They pivoted on one of the corners. So they reduced the amount of square footage that is inside the RPA buffer, and it should be noted that the size of the garage remains the same. So there's still encroachment into the RPA buffer with a 2,000 square foot garage. The 3,500 square feet of land inside the RPA buffer would be disturbed with this alternative. So this is what the applicant brought to our work session. The Ferrogis are on-call engineers. We had both firms share the CAD files.
Just a minute, back up. So the overhang is the area in question, correct?
Anything inside the RPA is in question, sir.
So, oh, I see the line going through it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So alternatives, this is a 1,450 square foot garage. And I believe there was a discussion about pulling a boat in the garage. This garage, 1,450 square foot, is 60 feet in depth. So you have an end-loaded garage with a 60-foot bay, should somebody want to pull whatever they want to in this. And this alternative has 0 square feet of encroachment into the RPA buffer. This is the larger of the two. The other alternative that was pitched at our work session was a 990 square foot garage, also with no encroachment into the RPA buffer with the structure itself or the driveway. And I want to clarify with the previous, the driveway is also out of the RPA buffer.
No, say that again?
With both of the scenarios presented by staff, that staff is presenting as alternatives, the garage, in this case, a 1,450 square foot garage, and the driveway leading up to it are 100% out of the RPA buffer. As is the smaller location here, 990 square foot. So standards for review pursuant to the Code of Virginia and our local code, what this board is charged with in whether or not to grant a variance. So a variance shall be granted if evidence shows that a strict application of the terms of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, or the granting of a variance would alleviate a hardship. And it goes on. This is state code. We read this last time. So really the question at hand here is there a hardship? Has the applicant proven a hardship that they need a garage entirely in the RPA buffer? Or are there alternatives that could be done to help meet his needs? Again, there's already a single family home with a garage in it that is pre-Ches Bay. It's on the property. So they have a house with a garage. So the question the board has is the encroachment of a 2,000 square foot garage a hardship? And that is incumbent on the applicant to show. The county has shown you a couple different alternatives. And really based on our last hearing, staff still recommends denial of this application. And if the board has it, I don't know if Lucy has passed it out, the alternatives were also sent to DEQ. Mr. Moore has opined with staff. There's still the same opinion. The two alternatives outside of the RPA where no encroachment are the preferred methods, should this board want to talk about anything environmental. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. I'll be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. I'm going to give, in a minute, the board an opportunity, time to read the DEQ memo. But would you mind going back one slide? 2 slides? Okay. Keep in mind that this sentence reads, a variance shall be granted if the evidence shows that the strict application of the terms of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, or that the granting of the variance would alleviate a hardship. I just wanted to point that out to the board. All right, let's take, say 5 minutes or until everybody says they're done on the DEQ memo. You didn't get this? You have another copy? For short one. Hill, can you do me a favor? Tell me what page that paragraph is on in the zoning and subdivision ordinance of 2023.
It's on page 3-12 on the bottom right corner.
Goldman? Sorry. Have we finished reading the memo from the DEQ? Let me change it.
Mr. Chairman. And I don't know your protocol, so I apologize, but I'm Richard Stewart and I represent the county. At the appropriate time, I would just like a minute to mention a couple things that Mr. Smolnick didn't highlight, whenever it's appropriate, on behalf of the county.
Mr. Stewart, Senator, I'm about to open the floor for the Carbons to talk. Is what you're talking about something that should come first?
Well, in fairness to them, I think they should have the ability to respond to it because they have the burden under state law to prove beyond the preponderance of evidence that they should get this. And so I just wanted to mention a couple quick things that I think are important. But I can wait whenever you all deem it appropriate.
Mr. Carbon, Carabin, sorry. Do you mind if I allow the senator to go? Because he's got a few things that I think would be good for us to know and weigh in as you speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the BZA and the Caravans. Mr. Chairman, as you know, you get your authority from 15.2-2309, and in paragraph 2, you have the authority to grant this variance upon application or appeal, and this is actually a variance, but it's got to meet the standard of the definition of a variance in 15.2-2201, and you've got to make certain findings that are found in 15.2-2309, and I bring that to your attention. You have counsel, so I'm not trying to advise the board, but I represent the county, and it's important that certain findings are made in this because there may be an appeal to the circuit court by writ of certiorari, which is a review of your decision. And so I think it's important, your counsel can explain that further, to make those findings. The important thing that I'd like to bring to the BZA's attention is that King George County's ordinance, and in fact it's derived from state law, prohibits an accessory structure in the RPA. And one of the requirements of your ability to grant a variance is a finding that the proposed use or the variance granted is not contrary, in fact, to the ordinance. And in this case, it is. And I think you will need to look at that among the other things that Mr. Smolnick mentioned to you. And I've suggested to the Carabins that they get counsel in this matter when we spoke before, because I thought it was an important thing for them from the perspective of an appeal or a neighbor's objection that could end up in litigation if these findings are not properly made, just as a protection to them. And I always view things towards an appeal, a writ of certiorari before the circuit court. And so I wanted to highlight things, those things for you all. Unfortunately, it is their burden under state law to prove to you beyond the preponderance of the evidence that they've met each of those elements in order for you to grant the variance. So that's all I wanted to mention, and thank you all.
Thank you. Mr. Carabin, you are your representative.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the BZA. My name is Savannah Carabin Wimbush. I'm representing my dad, the applicant, Tony Carabin, on our variance application. We also brought with us today our engineer, Casey Schooler from the Benchmark Group, to also answer questions where necessary. If you go ahead and, I had to click. So we want to have a conversation about the project site again. There is a whole lot more history, Ms. Molnar, and I'm sure I don't have time to bring you up to speed on everything, but we were attempting to build within the 50-foot buffer. Awesome. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we've been working on this since July of 2023, trying to find the right way to arrive at a hearing in order to be granted our request. So we want to draw your attention to the project site. It was cleared prior to my parents owning the property. This is technically not a functioning buffer. So the size and layout that we went with, we searched for the right size and layout for my dad's needs as recommended by our engineer. It's also important to note that our property abuts a marshy area. So yes, while everyone has the limits of the 100-foot buffer, as you can see, we have a really unique peninsula looking situation, which adds the 100-foot buffer all the way around our property, which really reduces that buildable area significantly. So we took into the consideration the proposed projects that the county, or the proposed structures the county gave us, and unfortunately they're not going to work for the needs. We specifically laid out the 40 by 50 foot based on the storage needs that my dad has. But it's important to note that those two proposals that were made require no stormwater management, no plantings, and our proposed project is going to be better at fixing that buffer than the other two projects presented. I'm sorry. No, it was me and the mic. Sorry.
Can you back up, please?
Yes, sir.
You said that the project site photo was cleared prior to your purchase.
Yes. We have not done any of that at all. It was like that. My parents haven't done anything to the property.
When was that picture taken?
A few weeks before our public hearing.
So let me ask a question to the legal perspective, because I'm assuming that that's still inside the RPA. That area.
Yes.
From a legal perspective, the fact that it was purchased like that, it has no vegetation really that qualifies, if you agree that that is the case. Does that have an impact on how we should be considering that piece, that particular piece of this land?
The first factor is whether or not a hardship was created. I think that could play into the board's consideration of whether or not that particular element was satisfied for the variance request by this applicant.
I'm not asking you to judge a decision we have not made. I've asked you to evaluate the fact that this was a pre-existing condition and is not serving as a buffer, if that is the case. And if so, does that have an impact on how we should evaluate this?
It does not have an impact on the existence or existence of the RPA, whether it's 50-foot landward or seaward, or the applicability of the overlay district.
because it's not a part of the undue hardship. It doesn't impact the hardship.
That would, correct. That is the first finding, is either unreasonable restriction or alleviation of a hardship.
Word unreasonable is vague. That means it's up to us to decide what it means. All right, please continue.
Yes, sir. Excellent question. I understand what you're trying to ask. As in the site plans that were presented to you all from us, there is significant stormwater management and plantings that would go into restoring this, like the area into a functioning buffer. And I'm getting into Casey's technical language here, but we really wanted to note that on our new plans, Casey did a fantastic job. This revision from the last site plans that you saw is a 40.4% reduction in the total proposed impervious surface inside that 100-foot RPA buffer. So you asked us to go back, figure out how we can reduce that encroachment, and we did by 40%. So we wanted it to really draw attention to that. I understand this is not an environmental concern thing. However, it is important to note that I've already contracted with a native vegetation provider. We're not just going to stick random shrubs and trees and whatnot. It's going to be a fully functioning buffer when we are done with it, with those proper stormwater mitigation. And encroaching in that RPA, because we would be doing that, that's why we have the things like the flow well. And I'm going to call on Casey to come up and explain some of the stormwater management techniques.
Hi, how are y'all doing tonight? So my name's Casey Schooler. I work for the Benchmark Group, and we were hired to put this plan together for them to show the proposed construction of the garage that they want to do. So as far as the stormwater side of things that I'll highlight, I know that I don't know if there's a way to kind of zoom in or not on the actual area of the. Oh, can I point to it? Does that work? Sorry about that. Yeah, that's a little, okay, that'll work. So in the top left corner of the plan here, that restoration table is straight out of DEQ's handbook. And essentially how that reads, and to sum things up, is for every 400 square foot of the buffer that you disturb, you have one canopy tree, 2 understory trees, and 3 small shrubs that you must replace back. And so essentially what we've done is we've taken the total amount of square footage that we are disturbing, which is that 3,500 number shown on this plan. And that is what that mitigation calculation to the right of the table is. All that reads where that 3,500 per every 400 square foot, we provided the necessary amount of plantings to go back inside of the 100-foot buffer. That is from a mitigation standpoint. What we've also done is done some stormwater management, whereas that would be the south corner of the garage, right next to the driveway, you'll notice a small circle where I call that out as a flow well. That flow well, the overall concept behind it is designed to capture stormwater off the rooftop of this structure and filter it naturally through the ground, through rock and things of that nature, to where that stormwater won't be leaving this garage untreated. It will be going through downspouts at each corner of the garage and be piped underground to this below ground flow well, if you will. And that will be located outside of the buffer as well. So, and that is that's the stormwater side of things that I was wanting to present to you guys. And like Savannah had also touched on, is that as this structure is still inside of the 100-foot RPA buffer, these plantings and stuff is in our attempt to try to negate the impacts that we are making inside of the buffer, to plant back some natural native vegetation to try to help restore enough to counteract what we're doing. for what they are proposing to do.
Where does this table come from again?
It is out of, trying to remember the exact, the manual is the DEQ's riparian buffer and mitigation standards, I believe. It
So-
can be found on their website.
So, am I understanding, and help me from the legal side, are you saying that this table indicates that for every 100 foot of encroachment, you can provide a means of adjudicating the challenge?
Yeah, so the intent behind this, and of course it's labeled as restoration establishment. The intent behind this table was that for whether it is a by right or goes through variance, whatever the case may be, for impacts inside of the buffer, of course, in most cases you're dealing with a vegetated buffer, that has trees and functioning shrubs and natural filtration. Well, obviously you would take those trees out once the site got cleared for your building. And this table is what you would use as a scale factor of how much you need to plant back.
Plant back into the area that you disturbed,
Exactly. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Within
still leaving you, this is not sort of a trade for space where you are reducing the challenged area by adding the right type of vegetation in accordance with DEQ to conserve that area.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes. Yes, in a nutshell is that, it's not, I think the intent behind this was it wasn't a one for one trade. Like, hey, I took this tree down, I'm going to plant a tree back. Obviously you plant it, it's nowhere near the mature size that other tree was. So that is why that's why it's one tree, two other understory trees and shrubs per a 400 square foot area. Now, in my experience with this chart, a lot of times this chart is being used for pre-Ches Bay lots for, let's say, new construction. If somebody came to me with a property that was a pre-Ches Bay lot where the buffer restricted their buildable area, this chart would be used to come up with a calculation of how much vegetation would be needed to be planted back to try to help restore the buffer as much as possible.
To the board, are there other questions you have?
There is one other thing I'd like to add. I don't know if it would be shown on here, but so this very last page of our plan, this spreadsheet you see on the left, that is DEQ's Virginia Runoff Reduction Method spreadsheet. That's like the stormwater Bible, if you will. And essentially what we've done is you take in consideration the type of soils on the property, how much impervious cover you're putting down, how much you're disturbing, the whole 9 yards, and punching in those areas. And then also implementing that flow well that I had spoke about prior, and essentially that green number that is about midway through the spreadsheet shows that this site as a whole would meet stormwater requirements for DEQ based on the conditions and the current conditions and the proposed conditions. Okay. Right, and as Savannah had noted, that in most cases the VRRM is required on by the county for applications such as this, or for any construction inside of the buffer.
Is there any discussion, questions from the board? I have a question for legal. It's a little hard to follow. So in the end, is it true from what we're hearing that he may be improving the outcome inside that area, but the outcome is still that he's across the RPA line. I'm sorry, Mark?
Oh, would you like me to attest to that?
So you were talking that this particular plan is 40% better than the original plan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, and the intent behind this restoration table, as I stated before, it's not necessarily a one-to-one. And as far as the stormwater goes, you know, I could get into the details of all of that stuff, but essentially, you know, based on what we're putting on the ground and what we're approaching inside of the buffer, that's what all of the mitigation and stormwater is based on to follow DEQ's guidelines for scenarios such as this.
I can clarify, Mr. Chairman, on the applicability of the mitigation guidelines, which are, it's a matter of policy established by DEQ, what they believe is an appropriate mitigation for impacts to the landward 50 foot of the RPA. Those are not legal requirements, and they aren't specific to the board's decision on a variance application, but this board does have the authority to impose conditions on any variance that it issues. And that's where the mitigation usually comes into play, is a variance is, you know, deserving and issued, but we're going to condition that X amount of mitigation. The applicant in this case has proposed a certain level of mitigation as part of their development plan and their application, but that's where the mitigation comes into play with respect to an exception to Ches Bay, in this case, which is issued as a variance from the overlay district.
Thank you. That's Mark. Go ahead. No, I can't. Just speak freely. I prefer that you open the mic so everyone can hear your question.
So perhaps I misunderstood earlier. So this is a 40% one. Are there two other things that we're going to see, or is pretty much?
I think that the two other that you are talking about were the two options that the county had presented prior that showed this smaller building out completely outside of the buffer.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, this is just a revision to the prior plan that they submit or was submitted on the prior meeting.
Oh, in summary, if I have this right, the revision includes a little bit of change to the positioning of the building, more address of the RPA area to improve that, and not include concrete or blacktop where it was.
The material of the driveway, the Carabins can address too. I'm not sure what material they wanted to install. But is that your question regarding the driveway? As far as
thank you. So,
yep.
Yes, we'll start asking you some questions. You want it to be poured. So I'll open that up again to the board to ask questions. I'll probably have more.
Okay.
You want? It looks to me, looking at these two alternatives, that actually you could have gotten the space you were looking for, but differently. Why was that not pursued by you?
So.
And stayed outside the RPA.
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned earlier, the dimensions of the garage as proposed were determined by our engineer, a suggestion by our engineer to us for what we needed. And if you look at the other two options, they're kind of like obscure in length, and it would really significantly reduce the amount of maneuverability that we would have with the structure itself.
Yeah, from what I'm reading, if you don't mind me interrupting, the original thing that they want is 1,500 square feet, and these two other options were down to 1,450 square feet and 990 square feet. So those other options that were proposed were to get to 100% out of the buffer, they have to shrink the size of the garages. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Was it possible to add to the garage in the house and then do one of the garages that was
Add a little clarification on that. So there is room to add onto the garage. However, it's still not going to meet the space requirements. That's really
no.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying to do both, to add to the garage at the house
Mhm.
and then do one of the smaller ones. And then I saw a nifty thing down in Florida where they're doing these garages where people put 3 cars in one slot. Like they stack them 3. They're really deep.
I think the issue here is contiguous space being
Yeah,
needed.
I understand, but like maybe we need to get creative and do a double.
Might be,
Find your own, I'm just offering a suggestion, like if we can't find a compromise.
there
I
may
understand.
still be legal issues with respect to the RPA. By adding even onto the existing dwelling, don't you now have to meet standards? You don't carry forward your grandfather once you start building anew.
I didn't look.
So that was not something that,
I didn't look. I just.
oh, it's great.
We appreciate your thoughts on trying to meet in the middle. That's what we've been trying to do from the very beginning. So thank you.
Thinking outside the box.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I know I asked this last time, and I know the answer, but going smaller is really not an option based upon the equipment and storage you're looking for, right? So
No,
you're pretty
sir.
much in either it's the plan or continue fighting on, right?
It seems to me, Tony, everything seems to go around this 40% reduction is what the best that they can come up with to satisfy their needs. Now, these other ones that were smaller garage proposed by whomever, I don't know. They're not been proposed by you. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sir.
I'm sorry. These two other ones that shows the smaller garages, these are not your plans. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Guess my question has to do with more about the structural perspective. You have a rectangle, 50 feet by 40 feet
Yes, sir.
total, right? 15 feet overhang, meaning sort of a roof, but not structure.
Correct.
What? I'm looking at sheet 1 of the county's first proposal. Or I could even look at the other. The whole point of where I'm looking is you need, you have in the county's offer or alternative, there's this, says EX, is that existing? Please. where I'm headed is you have space that you can still use and it still be outside the RPA. Oh, yeah. So I'm looking at the larger version, 1450. And I get that what you're trying to do is move maybe one thing in and another thing in side by side. And that's a lot harder if it's not in a rectangle form. But there is space. There is space. And what I really don't understand is why that was not a third option, whether it came from the county or from you. That you used up the space that remained between what exists in the alternative one and the RPA. That won't work?
Not to my needs, sir.
Go ahead, Mark. It's a reduction.
Well, it's, 1,450 square feet versus
No, it wouldn't be
100 square feet.
1450. It would be greater than 1450. In fact, it would be very near the totality of the rectangle.
It
It just won't be a rectangle.
says on the plan 1,450 square feet.
Yes, I know, but Mark, when I'm here, come here, I'll show you. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
There is also no lean-to on the proposed plans.
Overhang's gone. And the problem I have with that right there is the width. 20 feet wide allows you to pretty much park a boat on a trailer, and that's it. At 20 feet wide, you can't park anything next to it.
At that end.
44 foot long boat too, right?
Correct.
So if you take a 44 foot long boat, like you said, so basically you'll back it, if you take that drawing, you back it in that new driveway, and it basically consumes that entire length of the, you got about 15 feet by 25 feet of usable space for anything else.
Correct.
Right.
It's basically the problem that with the space laid out. Is what we put.
Now, what if that was expanded out to the yellow?
I mean, have it not squared off. I mean, have the walls like this? What you're saying?
Essentially.
Are we stuck with square buildings?
That's sort of the question.
Architectural design.
That's how the builders like to build them.
I know.
Of course, it would be a whole new proposed plan for me to get somebody to do a building such as that. My issue is the 20 feet wide. That space is just not enough width.
And no overhang.
And no overhang. So my question to you, sir, is at the last meeting, I thought we were coming in to this meeting showing you that we were willing to work with the county and reduce the amount that's in the RPA a little bit. We did 40%. I'm willing to do pavers, anything it takes to go with the building that I originally asked for. So that's what we focused everything on. Not this. The county doesn't seem like they bent at all on this. All they're giving me is not in the RPA. So my question is it an absolute no for the RPA? Not 1 foot, 1 inch?
But that's the purpose of requesting the variance and in explaining that hardship that we have on the topography of the lot.
In the county's defense, I mean, that's what you're looking at. Here's the RPA, you're in it or you're out.
Right. And because the county can't approve a project like that, that's why we're requesting a variance. But to his point, it was our understanding that you all directed us to work with the county to reduce the encroachment, reduce the amount of impervious surface, and we came back with that 40% reduction. Yes.
I just think it
I'm doing nothing but trying to improve my lot. I want something that's aesthetically pleasing so that my neighbors are not unhappy with me. I've conversed with both of them. They're on my side. I don't know what else I can do.
It seems to me that you had a very good point a little while ago. Although the size of the garage is, because it's 40, the size that you're proposing is a 40% reduction, but that doesn't take into account the extra shrubbery and all of those things that you're doing. That adds on to that percentage, right? So it's not really 40% reduction, it's more than that.
Correct.
I think what I think where the attorneys could probably tell us is that if all that shrubbery and flow well are nice, but it's a land use issue versus an environmental issue. All these things add to the environmental and can help us offset in our minds, just basing it there, but it's not really part of the legal determination. I assume with an assumption.
Yes, that is correct. That the amount of plantings and mitigation aren't part of the technical test for the grant of a variance under the county's zoning overlay.
And Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out the county has something to say, I think.
I know I wasn't ready. I'm looking for something I thought I saw in the DEQ perspective. I thought I saw it there. Well, the surface is asphalt.
Yeah, we left it on the plans, not stating whether it was asphalt or paver, so we could have that conversation. Because if you go, and I'm sorry, can you go back to our presentation, please? Permeable pavers, excuse me, permeable pavers. Sorry. So if you look at where the proposed additional, I'm not an engineer, so please excuse my technical terms here, but that shaded gray area, only a sliver near the overhang is actually encroaching in that 100-foot RPA. So we don't know, we can do like a mix asphalt and permeable pavers. Would you be amenable to the whole thing being permeable pavers? That's a conversation we were willing to have.
Somebody have a pointer?
I mean, this has one, but it doesn't, I don't think it's very, very faint, but this could work.
Yeah.
That's driveway. Yeah, like the asphalt, yeah, asphalt wise. And I understand the thought process here about the mitigation and offsetting it. I think it's still important to know what the purpose of a 100-foot RPA buffer is, and that is to filter nitrogen and phosphorus from stormwater runoff. That's the sole existence of the RPA buffer.
I think we need a little openness here. We want to use the structure for a boat and some other things, and they can't be up against the boat. Correct?
It's not enough width.
Well, I'm actually looking at your proposal.
Oh.
There's a drive. I really should have brought my pointer.
Do you want me to bring you this one?
Oh, if you can see it. Thank you. Yeah, that was useful. You see the area between your garage and what looks to me like a driveway. is the existing driveway? Is it pre-existing the driveway? I apologize if I'm going beyond the questions I should ask, but why not just use that space for the garage?
Oh, Casey can answer. Casey got it.
So, you guys hear me? Yep. So the reason that the garage cannot come forward anymore is this line that runs right through here that is labeled 35 BRL, that stands for Building Restriction Line. And that's a zoning building setback requirement. Whereas, you know, for any structure that's built cannot be any closer than 35 feet to the edge of the right of way.
Unless you're granted a variance.
Unless you're granted a variance, yes, sir. And in our situation, moving the garage any more this way, there is another issue that poses is that now we're getting closer to the existing driveway and we only have 19 feet to the property line. So moving the garage, it may be able to be slid a few feet, but essentially it was placed where it was so that they could still have vehicular access through and out of the property without being too close to that corner of the garage. And obviously, if we took the same thing and we were to rotate the entire building down more, we're still not getting much more outside of the buffer. So this layout here is taking the size of the structure and trying to get it as far outside of the buffer as we possibly could, still meeting county building setback requirements, and still having the reasonable use of this existing driveway, taking that in consideration as well.
Does the laser work now? I haven't forgot you, Mr. Smolnick. I really haven't. Still don't see anything. Oh, okay. All right. Which button? The red button. All right. Just then. You saw it? All right. Here's an area. And I see this line. And this is a fairly sizable area that you could draw a line across and come back up, and you'd capture quite a lot of space. And your issue would then be more along the lines of minimizing the overhang into the RPA that I see up in upper left, and then a variance across the other dashed line. So that structure would not meet your needs, that sort of structure. I'm not saying we would even approve that. I'm just saying, would that structure meet or not meet your needs?
And so just to clarify, you were attesting of changing the shape of this structure shown to something that would fit inside of this area. Is that you're looking?
Inclusive, yes. And so bring it down, bring the wall that down, up, over. Okay, do you see where it says proposed additional driveway? There's an arrow. That whole space. Couldn't you put your building across that way and then essentially make it almost rectangular going back up, without Well, I don't think we can get it out of the RPA minutes deed. Hello, hello? So what you were saying is you're loud enough, but now you're louder. Uh, it would legally. It's just easier because this comes with so much weight. We know why the RPAs are there. It's protection, right? For the whole county, for all of us, for the commons. This is the commons. This is for all to use. Why not just turn as much as you can to bring the building here, right? Go up this way, go up this way. You almost have a rectangle, and it's almost the same size. Why was that not considered?
Options, I'm sorry. That would be kind of some of the options and sizes that the county had presented. And I think that's where Mr. Carabin had alluded to the 20 feet in width on his end of not wanting that.
Can't get to where you are. Here's why. What is this length? 40 feet. I'm indicating that if you pulled this down, you still had 40 feet. It's just not at the same place. Which part? 40 feet, but much less. All right, now we'll discuss it with the board. Actually, we'll give an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I'll need to. He deferred to me, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
But I just want to say one more thing then. Let me ask the question, Mr. Smolnick. Why was that not even considered in your alternative?
Sir, from the county, we are looking to avoid any encroachment in the RPA in its entirety. So that's why I had two professional engineers with stamps in Virginia who are held accountable for everything that they do and say, draw up two proposals that are 100% out of the RPA. That is why they were considered, sir.
Fair and adequate. Thank you. Mr. Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to finish up, this is one of those times where you hate to have to tell people what the law is. Carabins are really nice folks. We met with them, we talked to them, we looked at options, we explained things, and it's just, these are the days where your job is hard. But that's what the law is in Virginia, and we all have to live by the same laws. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if you granted this variance, you'd have to do it for every single person in King George County on the river. It's just what you would have to do, and I think that probably they could all be appealed and be overturned in the circuit court. And that really is the crux of this thing at the end of the day. Buffer mitigation is a wonderful thing, and I hope they do it. I hope they decide to plant that bare ground. I don't know who cleared it like that. They bought it that way, but they're going to have erosion problems if they don't plant it anyway, quite frankly. But at the end of the day, they have not addressed any of the criteria which you have to address and prove to this board beyond the preponderance of the evidence in order for you to grant a variance. And there are 5 or 6 things that they've got to convince you of and produce factual evidence to show it. And I'm just afraid they haven't addressed any of those.
So I thought that I had read in here that it doesn't necessarily, no decision here necessarily conveys directly to any other neighbor. They have to come in and make the same arguments against what might be the same board, might not be the same board.
It would be, and again, I'll let your counsel advise you, but this board would be hard pressed given the same circumstances because they haven't shown that this is peculiar to this property. They haven't shown a hardship. They haven't shown any of those things for you to turn down others when you gave it to them. But again, you need to ask your counsel those questions. I'm very confident in my opinion in this.
If you recall, would be a case. On work that we
Like,
I think that's what Mr. Stewart's leaning towards is if we were to say, if the decision is to go forward and approve it, then we're setting a precedence where as long as the other people come in, they have similar type guidance of RPA and stuff, then it's more or less a handed decision to them. It kind of becomes checking the box per se. And so that was one of the considerations I was trying to get to at the last meeting as well.
that's a boat that they have to row upstream.
It
Okay,
makes it easier on the next person than it was on the first
may
person.
or may not. It's going to come down to this whole question of reasonableness, right? But we can't stretch reasonableness, whether we define it or not, beyond reasonable, right? We have to stay within some confine. And what we're seeking is a confine that will work both for you and the Board of Zoning Appeals, right? A variance request. That's what you're requesting. It would still be a variance request, but it would be far less impact. And if you're making these improvements, you still have a viable argument to someone, not me, to someone who would appeal our decision, which would not be made unless we thought it was an actual reasonable accommodation or variance request, a reasonable thing to do that could be met by the state satisfactorily. Now, I've been on the board, planning board, for 12 years I was on it. Key note, going before the state, when you have an argument and someone says, well, how was the decision made? We had references. We had the comprehensive plan. We base our decisions on the comprehensive plan. The state then looks at that and says, was that logical? Was that reasonable? 95%, according to both times that I went to the court, said the state will vote in the county's favor. Now, I'm not guessing at this game, but I am guessing that you could do more to reach us. That's really where I'm at. And I don't, you did go far. The 40% is huge, but a number have made it clear that that's not a decision point, although it is not unprecedented that trades are made for space. Isn't that correct? Trades are made for space into protected areas.
Generally, that comes into play. It can come into play in the context of mitigation through conservation easements being dedicated in other areas. But in general, that applies more when you're talking about open space requirements within the zoning ordinance, not necessarily resource protection areas. But it does happen here.
You had a building, and you were adding ground back that was going away underneath that building, right? In your original plan, you told us about that? Whether it was riprap or whatever, you were,
I don't quite understand the question. Can you repeat that, please? Are you referencing the Living Shoreline project?
yes.
And it's not a requirement of the project, but I'm sorry. I guess I don't understand your
ahead.
question. No, I want to answer your question.
I think I know the answer. It is not under the building, it is on the shoreline. You were asking about an erosion on a building. It's not at the building, it's at the shoreline. That's what we were discussing at the last meeting.
Where there's no land, there's no RPA, correct? They're kind of, it sounds to me like they're kind of adding outward from the land to reclaim what was there before. The erosion, protecting against the current erosion, adding back and protecting against further erosion.
As part of this,
No, they're original.
that
He just described.
a living shoreline project as part of I don't know if that's part of a wetlands approval or if it's part of some other.
It's a joint permit application, and we mentioned the Living Shoreline project to further prove that we are extremely serious about proper mitigation and the buffer performing. So it was kind of like, not only are we just doing the stormwater mitigation on the garage because we have to, but here are additional measures that we're doing on the property because we want to. So it was a conversation had, and we were advised to mention doing the Living Shoreline project. And Mr. Scaramosi, you do have a point. We were advised by, it's a completely separate engineer that does these types of projects. In theory, the shoreline can be moved back with a Living Shoreline project because it will relocate that buffer, but that area is marsh. So it more than likely will not move the buffer in that particular area. It's going to move the buffer closer to the house and where the dock is.
Key words are we'll move the buffer.
Not remove, sir. The buffer will always be 100 foot. It's a matter of adjusting the buffer because of that shoreline. But the shoreline
Buffer
project.
will be reduced near the garage.
No, sir, it's marsh. No, sir.
All right. It's a, we have to figure out what we think is reasonable. Let me ask this, are there adjustments to either of the county's proposals that you would find satisfactory?
If I'm not allowed to be in the RPA, no. And the only reason for that is the width.
The what?
The width.
Good.
10 feet would help tremendously, but that would be in the RPA. So again, I asked what we needed to do. I was told reduce the amount in the RPA. That's where we're at now. If somebody would come to me, the county, the board, somebody, and say, here is something that we can work with. We're bending a little bit, you're bending a little bit, it'll suit your needs. That would have been fine, but I've had no cooperation whatsoever on even somebody coming out and taking a look.
Okay. They know where they reside.
Gotcha.
They reside outside the RPA.
Understood.
Actually, they're outside the RPA and the BRL. I was just saying, from our perspective, the BRL might be easier to contend with.
We weren't aware of that even being an option.
Well, I didn't say it was an option. I said it is something that we could consider.
Okay.
But that's a board question. It's not something I can answer. explain what you want and why. The lawyer included. So what's being asked is if we can remove ourselves temporarily and discuss with the lawyer some of our questions and get better answers to come back to you with. I get that because I'm on a gray space here, just even suggesting that you do something that still crosses the line, right? Well, why would I ask you to do that? That's right.
That's all I'm asking.
Put another drawing.
So, next.
This board is entitled to enter into closed meeting for advice of counsel on specific legal matters. I can provide you the form of a motion to accomplish that. It wouldn't be for the discussion of the substance of this case or this request necessarily, but I can provide you with guidance on the
I think you did.
related.
Didn't someone?
I am sure that I do.
Would someone on the board be willing to make a motion along the lines of what's being expressed by the attorney?
Well, we have, we're gonna, it's gonna have to be a little more specific than that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, have we finished with the comment portion of the discussion? So we can move to closing that and having board discussion?
I think it would help us when we move into closed session to understand what you're willing to do to get what you need done and still get as close as possible to what the county would require, minimizing the request variance impact. That right now it's very large. It's 1,450 feet. I get their problem. I get the county's problem.
What are my options?
All right, so that's what we'll figure out, that we can express to you legally
That's
as what your options
that's
are.
all I've ever asked.
And that's the kind of discussion we want to have. So,
Okay. So I move that the Board of
Mike,
Zoning Appeals enter into a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel retained by the Board of Zoning Appeals regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel relating to statutory authority, state regulations, zoning ordinance requirements, variances, and pending application in accordance with Virginia Code Section 2.1-3711A8.
Chairman, and I apologize. I don't want to
is there a second?
I don't want to second guess your counsel, but what is the legal matter?
Is there a second? No. Okay. Was there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I
Go ahead.
just would point out to the board, I don't know what the legal matter is that you all could go into closed session for. But
We won't know either until we go into closed session. What we want to be sure, Senator, is that we don't make any recommendations, we don't propose anything that is outside the binds of the law.
I just don't want you to violate FOIA, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
The
thank-
county attorney can be assured that I will not allow the board to violate FOIA.
And in fact, I'd rather speak out here, right?
You have to finish with the motion.
That's a good point too. But FOIA can be fed appropriately even under those circumstances. I think. Is that true?
Absolutely. Any public body has the ability to go into closed meeting on a proper motion to discuss the matters that are entitled under 2.2 3711. And There will be a certification motion made after, and each member will decide for themselves if that motion and discussion was in accordance with FOIA. And my job as counsel is to make sure that that meeting discussion is in accordance with FOIA, because the only reason you're going back there is for the provision of legal advice on specific legal matters.
Is there any discussion, further discussion on the motion and the second made? None heard? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Opposed? I think the motion failed. Oh, I didn't hear anything. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, you could simply call for a roll call vote, and that would make it clear whether or not.
Let's have a roll call vote. In favor?
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, the board will need a motion to reconvene in open session.
Chair will entertain a motion to reconvene in open session. Second,
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The board members will now need to be polled on the closed meeting. So there will be a roll call vote for each member to certify that to the best of their knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under FOIA, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting of the public body in closed session. Anyone believing that there was a departure from the requirements of these clauses shall state so prior to the vote and indicate the substance of the departure. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that you please poll the members.
With or without that in front of them so they can reread it and approve or not approve. Can you read it again,
Sure.
please?
The two clauses required to certify a closed meeting are that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements were discussed in the closed meeting, and only those matters as identified in the motion were discussed.
Anybody else have any questions about what he said? So the roll call vote has to do with yay or nay concerning what he said.
That's correct.
Sorry. Mr. Barney? Is that a yes?
Yes, vote.
Renata?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Only because I can't remember your last name. Yes. So all five. Okay. Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, back to your normal business.
All right. Does the board, Carabin, would you like to add anything before we continue our discussion? Mr. Smolnik, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, we have highlighted the criteria that's necessary for you all to find. You all have heard this, and that's where we are.
All right, so let's open the board up for further discussion.
Mr. Dines, can you please put on the screen the criteria for granting a variance? I'm zeroing in on unreasonably restrict the utilization and hardship. I can appreciate you have a beautiful application, great drawings, wonderful plan. I just don't see where there's an unreasonable restriction. There's opportunity for providing other dwellings, other shapes, sizes. And just don't see hardship either. So in terms of the criteria to prove a variance, I don't see any measure of it having been met by the applicant.
Last part again.
In my opinion, the applicant has not met the criteria for us granting a variance.
The onus is on us now, not on them.
Yes.
could determine if we think there's enough reasonableness.
And I was giving my opinion as to how I have listened to all the parts, looked at the criteria, examined the evidence, read DEQ, ordinance.
Other discussion?
So 30 by 60 work for you? If I take a hybrid of option 2 and I just basically square off, you're going to still encroach on the RPA, but it's a fraction of the RPA. And I get your argument is any part of the RPA is part of the RPA. But again, when we talk 1,900 square feet versus 55 square feet, rough math, I mean, it becomes significantly different in the argument to me.
Sorry.
Well, I go back to we talked about the 44-foot boat, and then I look at your 40 by 50 garage. I mean, I back up trailers periodically. I'm curious to how you're going to fit a 44-foot boat into a 40-foot length. So you're going to have to turn it into the 50-foot. So once you get it in the garage, what are you using? A utility cart or something to turn it and put it in the corner?
But
I mean, you're not going to do it with a truck.
Is garaging a boat a hardship?
No, that's the other part of it. It's an accessory building.
I think we need to hear from you.
I'd like to hear from the engineer. So
I just didn't know if you guys were moved. Yeah, no, as far as the 30 by 50 goes, I think that that's something that could maybe be explored as long as, I'll let Mr. Carabin attest to that. But the overall impacts, I would definitely have to look at the numbers inside of the RPA. Obviously, we would still be inside of it. That number may be able to get shrunken some, but I don't know if we'll be able to get it to hardly any at all.
yeah, I think if you take option 2 and you look at it, even if you go 30 by 60 with option 2, there's going to be a corner that's inside that RPA.
Yes,
If you can reduce it down to 30 by 50, that obviously becomes a much lesser wedge. Well, the county's still going to disagree, then you're inside the RPA, but I'm just looking at, I'm trying, again, I understand what you're trying to do. I'm a land rights kind of guy. You got a tough piece of property. I know where it's at. I'm familiar with it. It's a tough piece of property. And I get that the house was probably built well before these requirements were ever established, because your house wouldn't be there except for coming through and going through hardship to get to that. So again, I'm trying to work it to minimize the effect on the other side. It's not exactly what you're going to want. I mean, obviously it doesn't have your overhang that you talked about, but it gets you closer to from zero is where I'm at. So that's all I'm asking is if it's something that's an option.
You mentioned a dimension that was 30 by 60.
Guys, gonna have a discussion. We turn on the microphones, please.
And I'm proposing a hybrid option as part of the consideration. The variance is for crossing in the RPA. If they're willing to accept the 30 by 60, I think we can put conditions on it that pursue option 2 with crossing the RPA is kind of where my logic is going. I mean option 1, yeah.
Is this what you're conveying?
Yes.
Or something else?
No, that's what I'm conveying.
Exactly this.
Yes.
what is to do. That requires a variance, anyway, right?
That's what we're here for. No, go to the option one. I'm sorry. I kept saying option two.
Mark, please.
All I was doing.
Bring your magic marker.
RPA encroachment.
You might need to repeat yourself for the record.
All right, for the record, you want to turn the camera to, or? What I was doing is I'm trying to take the county's proposal and I'm trying to take the original plan proposal and kind of come to kind of a cross solution here. We're here for the variance, so my logic is, okay, if we draw the line across, square it off, that way, you know, we talked about the boat being 44 by 15, not having any room. This would give him that extra room to, you know, maneuver inside your own garage, essentially. And that's what I'm asking, is if that's something of a consideration to the party.
And tell him the next part. I guess it's obvious to everyone that you have to get a variance to do that.
Sorry. Speak louder, please.
The proposal he's making to get a bigger garage makes an encroachment, which means that we have to do a variance to let them do that, correct?
We'd have to approve it a variance with conditions. That is correct.
Yes, that's,
Are there other conditions that would be considered under this circumstance?
I see none.
Well, I would still think we'd want to make sure that we get the flow well, the shrubbery, the other proposed environmental protections to the land use as part of that. I think the other one we talked about was a porous type driveway versus a hard structure, concrete pavement. So I think those would be potential considerations.
Is there a motion before, what?
For your suggestion of a porous driveway, would that still necessarily be needed if the driveway is not encroaching on the buffer at all? Right, it's not, but you just mentioned. Mm-hmm.
No, it was just, like I said, it was a consideration. I'm not hard over on porous is what I'm gonna
Okay.
say. Because
Okay.
it's been brought up by other members before, last meeting we talked about it and stuff. You're outside the, you know, the buffer area for the driveway, so.
Right, okay.
Well, I'd have to defer to the county on the driveway, what would be best for the purposes of protecting water flow, et cetera, whatever goes into these things that apply, whether that would be asphalt would be an improvement or some other form of porousness would be an improvement. I can't decide that, right? That's why I said I would defer to county on whether, on their recommendation, but they can't make any recommendation until we've decided what we're gonna, how we're gonna move forward. Is there motion to be brought to the board or just a vote? Is there any motions that would, go ahead. You were gonna say?
So we would have to have a motion.
Right. So that's what I'm asking. Is there a motion that we would need to discuss? If there are no motions, then we need to vote.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we deny the application for variance case number Z2024-00196 for the applicant has not demonstrated hardship to approve the variance.
Is there a second? No second? The motion does not carry. Are there any other motions? given that there are no other motions, then this vote that I'm going to ask for has to do with, as presented by Mr. Carabin, his alternative.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
I'd like the motion that we open this variance consideration to, modify the county's proposed option 1 to open up that sliver and reconvene with the new engineering drawings for consideration of that way we have the actual RPA numbers, everything in our consideration. I don't know how else to word this motion. Basically, I want to make a motion to get to what I kind of drew on the board with my finger, versus simply reject this current variance.
Are you making a motion that we simply extend this meeting, or are you making a motion that we project conditions?
My preference would be to project conditions on this variance that we pursue option 1 modified with the additional 10, the 10 by 25 or 35 feet section that's not currently projected.
I think without measure, you're saying draw a straight line across one side to the line coming across the other, and where they intersect is the space in question.
30 by 60 structure.
So to clarify, what's your motion again?
I motion that we accept, or that we move forward with the variance with conditions to accept option 1 modified to reflect 30 by 60, and put conditions on to accept that the flow wells and the shrubbery considerations from the original plan are still maintained, and that we maintain the environmental aspect of remediations that were being put in place.
Anybody record that? Can you play it back?
I mean, everything you say is being recorded. We don't have a playback feature, to the best of my knowledge, but everything you say is recorded and on YouTube. So,
all right. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Discussion.
I still don't see a hardship. I understand the motion. I'm sorry, but
Wait,
excuse me.
Just one at a time.
Garaging a boat is not a hardship. Garaging other elements, it's just not a hardship. You could take either one of option 1 or option 2 completely outside of the RPA. It's reasonable use of the land. So as part of the discussion for the motion, that's my contribution.
Would that work for you if you have to go back and do plans again?
Mr. Chairman, are you still thinking it over? We have a motion and a second.
And discussion. Is there any other discussion? I think you added something to the motion. So I'm not sure.
Legal definition.
Okay. That's still in discussion. Can someone tell us the legal?
can I please remind the BZ members, whenever you talk, make sure your microphone is on. There's a lot of microphones that are not on, please. So I guess my question is, so
Wait, you have a question?
how do we enforce, what are we enforcing if, I want to be clear on this motion, I heard, talking about a sliver, and I just want to make sure if this does get passed by the BZA, we as a county need to enforce this whenever the plans come in. So please be very clear on what it is you're approving, encroachments and whatnot, so that we know whenever the plans come in, what to look for and approve if we get to that stage. Thank you.
Barney, can I have my yellowed sheet back? Mr. Smolnik, would you take this, please? This is not my motion, it's just something I did earlier. The motion then calls that out.
So we have to dispatch with the current motion that's properly seconded.
Yes. But it's still in discussion. So the question was, is that enforceable?
Mr. Chairman, from a legal standpoint, I don't know what the dimensions are. I don't know how much encroachment there is. And I can't speak for the zoning administrator, but if I have to prove that, I can't, because I don't know how long that line is. I don't know how much encroachment is in the RPA. Based upon a rough, I understand what you mean, but I don't know that we could enforce that, because they could say it means one thing and we think it means another. So it's up to interpret. It's
Legalese,
subjective.
it's pretty clear. We move the 25-foot line out to 35 feet added, and then bring it down 10 feet to the 20-foot line that goes up and down, and that's 30 by 60. Very clear.
And you instructed that, and you have written that in, and you have included how much is in the RPA, so we know. And you've also included in your motion all the plannings that are supposed to be there, that you want. You've included in that the grading plan. All of those things are in that drawing, I assume. I couldn't see it, Mr. Chairman.
So I think the point is that the motion, there was some discussion during this time about continuing with your plans for 40% improvement, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds like that has to be part of the storyline that is conveyed clearly, and the measurements clearly are this sheet one, for their alternate, or is this is number one? All right. So modifying the county's number one proposal such that instead of being 25 by 10 by 35 and 30 feet down, 60 feet over, 20 feet up, it's modified to be 30 feet up on the east end, 30 feet up, just as the county proposed, and then 60 feet out, and then 10 feet down to meet the county's original proposal. The addition would roughly equate to that 10-foot line, which angles down to the corner of 20, would still be inside. Outside, meaning they would overlap the RPA by what looks to be 10 feet over to the other 10 foot. So it's splitting that rectangle in half. That 10 by 35 foot rectangle, half of that would be reaching over into the RPA, and the other half would just be inside the bounds. It would not be a challenge. So what is being presented are those measurements, this drawing, and those constraints applied to any decision we make herein. Of course, it doesn't apply if we vote no. Because no is no. So, so the motion then is that we move forward with this proposal and vote yea or nay. Senator.
Mr. Chairman, if I may very briefly, I just want to correct one thing. The county was not proposing that.
No, I didn't say the county proposed that. I said based on the county's first proposal,
Yes,
we
sir.
modified that.
Yes, sir. The county didn't make any proposals in this. The board asked county staff, yes, sir. The board asked county staff to come up with some examples. County
All right, I
hired
got you. It's a
professional,
language problem.
hired professional engineers to try to assist, but they are not proposing anything because I think that's improper. So I'm just telling you, just to correct the record, they have not proposed anything here. Just illustrating to you how something could be built outside of the RPA.
Mr. Chair, I think with the language that we would have to incorporate into a motion to get approval on this variance as the applicant has requested, I think it's a bit much to try to get all that into a motion. I think what is proper is that we deny the application as is. And based on the discussions that we've had here, I think it's pretty obvious that the applicant has taken all this on board and can have professional drawings completed and a new application submitted.
What would be the purpose of a new application instead of extending the application they have?
Because the motion that would have to be made would have to be very complex and cover all of the elements: DEQ, zoning, CBPA, and I don't know that we have the ability to craft that level of detail into a motion with this board. I think there's too much that has to be in the application.
And I tend to agree because you saw how hard I was struggling to come up with the proposed words of the motion to begin with, just get to where I was trying to go. So I don't.
I think your argument was probably.
I don't like the
reasonable.
idea. I'm struggling with the idea of rejecting the application and forcing them to reapply and pay the cost again to come back. Versus that's where I was talking about. We were struggling with the discussion of, extending it, giving them the opportunity. That way, that the bureaucracy cost doesn't exist, type thing. Because as was shared, I mean, they've kind of bent over backwards here trying to get what they want in here, and they've been trying to accommodate us, and we kind of keep moving the needle a little bit.
Understand, but sorry.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant has the option to request a deferral. It has been a process that has been ongoing with the BZA, and if they would like a decision, they are entitled to a decision at this meeting. But if the applicant would like to proceed on the sort of discussion that this board has had, they could request that from the board. But if they would like a decision, I think they are entitled to a decision based on the timeline from their application to today's date.
And that's what I was going to mention. Thank you. That you have to make a decision tonight according to the time clock. They have already deferred this, agreed to defer it once, but they're entitled to defer it again. I think as long as they want to. And again, I've suggested they talk to council, but I don't know if there's any on a BZA, because I don't represent the BZA. I don't know if there's any time limit you have to wait if you have a application that's denied. So, but I think those are your two choices, and your council's exactly right.
So I'm at a loss. We have a motion. And they requested deferral on that decision.
The motion would need to be either withdrawn at the request of the applicant, for a deferral, or the motion can proceed in any form that a board member believes is the proper form of a motion. And if there's some amount of muddling through, then we will get there. But the applicant doesn't have the ability to defer a motion made by the board member. That motion would need to be either withdrawn or voted on.
Correct. So that's where we are, because we have a motion, it's properly seconded. So we either have to withdraw the motion or we have to vote on it. Either way, we have to dispatch of the motion that's properly seconded.
They can request a deferment, right?
But we have to dispatch with the
After the
seconded
vote,
motion.
they can request a deferral.
They could, if it's a bit procedurally complex with a motion pending. So the easiest thing might be to have the board member who made the motion to withdraw it, and then figure out if the applicants would like a deferral. And if they do not, then the motion could be reintroduced. But that is incumbent upon the board member who made the motion.
Sorry, ma'am.
Oh, he should, yeah.
We have to figure out what we do with this motion.
So I guess y'all vote and then you ask us.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to withdraw the motion on the board right now, so further discussion.
Does that motion, that withdrawal have to be seconded,
Second it?
or is it done?
It's done.
Thank you. That was easy. Nothing's easy, and nor should it be. I mean, a lot of things are in the balance. They really are, right? Whatever vote we were about to make, if we were going to make a vote one way or the other, would open doors or close doors to other county residents.
Yep.
So it's very clear that we're at a pivotal moment. So before I take a vote, is there anything that you'd like to say? Mr. Carabin?
Is this now where you're looking for us to decide if we'd like the deferral? Can you give us a moment to discuss amongst ourselves? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, giving them a moment, it might be appropriate for the board to take a quick recess, 5 minutes, whatever it might be.
Are the BZA meetings held the fourth Tuesday of each month? Thank you. Just want to take that to consideration as we discuss.
Well, we never broke.
No.
Okay, if we defer, is it going to require our engineer to be here, or will you all be okay with the plans as presented with the stormwater mitigation, so on and so forth, for the option discussed? Because we're spending money getting Casey here and doing all of this stuff, so we're trying to limit our costs here as much as possible. And if that's the case, we can convene sooner rather than later. So it's a two-part question. are you going to want to hear from our engineer if we present his plans as you all discussed directly? And if that's the case, can you convene sooner than the 4th Tuesday of the month? Because that falls to your Thanksgiving.
Well, that's a different problem.
It is a different problem.
Thanksgiving's next month.
That's what I'm
October.
saying.
So October, you'd have an opportunity to hit the 4th Tuesday in October.
Okay.
So maybe that helps.
Check my
us.
calendar.
Can you do that? With or without the engineer? Max, I was gonna ask, are we allowed to show her the picture?
Yes, everything that you all have discussed will be part of the
Okay.
record.
So you should have this, so he can help you make decisions.
Can you confirm your availability for Tuesday, October 29th, please? Yes.
If it's the 4th Tuesday of the month, that's the 22nd.
Oh, my apologies.
5 of them?
I was still looking at November. 4th Tuesday.
Will not be here.
Well, would there be a
Oh yeah, I guess there should be
on the
us and
22nd?
y'all too.
I will not be here.
Okay,
We can.
what, you're looking at your needs first, we'll then look at the board and see if we'll have a quorum.
And the meeting would be at 6:30. If it's at 6:30, I can make it work.
Tuesday, the 22nd is our normal meeting date
Yes. Okay.
at 6:30.
Yes, sir. That's good
All
for
right.
you.
So are you asking for a deferral?
Yes, sir. We're asking for a deferral to the next scheduled BZA meeting on October 22nd at 6:30 p.m.
Who can make that meeting? Who cannot?
I cannot.
Mark, Ken, Bob?
I believe my schedule supports.
Probably not.
Well, just for everybody's, clarity, in order to grant a variance, the board has to vote by a majority of its membership, which would be 4 people. That would also be the quorum in order to have a meeting. So, whether the applicant would want more than 4 members there, they would need all 4 members to vote in their favor. Also, the board would need to have 4 people just to have a quorum in order to take action. So just for you all's planning purposes.
You're using different words, majority or quorum?
There is a quorum required for a meeting, and there is a specific membership vote to approve a variance, which is the majority of the membership entirely.
Majority, so it would have to be
Simple majority of the membership, not of the quorum,
what membership?
of the membership of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Maybe I need to say it differently. If there are 3 at the meeting, can the meeting make decisions?
No.
3 is a quorum. But make
Agrees.
4 a bigger majority is math. I'm just saying,
There are
what are the rules?
7 members of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Oh, that's right. I thought, where's the other 2?
Well, one,
No, that's not your question.
One recused himself.
That's right. Then we have another. Thought they were gonna be here. All but the one that recused himself. All right. One board member's making the case that he'll decide not to come. It's bothering me somewhat.
You currently have 6 members, and you have 1 vacant position for the James Monroe District. And then out of the 6 that you do have, Mr. Buckley has excused himself of this case.
So we need 4. That was, what I was trying to get at was we need 4.
Correct. You need 4 for a quorum in order to have a meeting. And in order to approve a variance request, a vote of 4 is required.
We have a motion to approve deferral to the 22nd of October at 6:30 here. Is there a motion?
A question, Mr. Chairman. I thought I heard somebody say they couldn't make that day. Is that true?
The question is whether or not we'll have a quorum that day.
Right.
So is there a motion for us to meet that day? Because that's not a normal meeting day. But it can be extended to the 29th. If you can make it the 29th, Rob?
So I'm not seeing where a motion's necessary. All we would do is adjourn until our next scheduled meeting. And after that, it would be a question of whether or not there would be a quorum. Trying to work out the fact that if the fact or non-fact that there'd be a quorum or not, that would change.
Do we have to approve the deferral or not?
The deferral would have to be approved, and that would ideally be deferred to a date, and time certain. So establishing whether or not there will be a quorum at the meeting date that it would be postponed to, I think is an appropriate exercise for the board to go through.
But we're not bound to meet on the 22nd. We could meet on the 29th.
Correct. You can call a meeting for the 29th.
All right.
And notice it consistent with FOIA and give everybody notice.
Is there a motion required to do that, or can the chair just move that we have to approve it or deny the request, right? Can you tell us if the room will be available?
At this point, sir, no, I cannot. And I will not be available, on those 2 dates, the 22nd or the 29th. Thank you, but I cannot tell. I don't have access to that. That is not, we have other staff members who book this room specifically. That is not under my purview as the county
You don't
administrator.
have it on your calendar?
It's a separate, it's the staff members who do that are not here. I did not anticipate having to look to additional dates. I could not, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Potential for other venues.
We could, potential for other venues, we could use, there's the Parks and Rec facility. We would have to check on that. I do not have access to that right now. There's
Just a thought.
library. I mean, there are options. We would just have to notice it with a specific date, time, and location. I believe it's 3 days prior to the meeting.
Correct. It would be 3 business days ahead of the meeting. If at any point this were established as a continued meeting and notice were given to the members, notice would then be given to the public contemporaneously with when it was given to
All right, so
the members.
we can be flexible and negotiate that between what you come up with and me. Right? You could talk to me about, well, you don't have another time and space available, or you do, right? Then we can decide that. So that doesn't have to be pinpointed tonight. Do we need a motion for this, or can we just vote that we defer until the 29th?
Assuming that's the applicant's request, or then the there would be a motion to defer would be appropriate.
Is there a motion?
I so move.
Can we defer to a date that the county and the applicant can agree to and approach it from that perspective rather than establish a date? Let the two parties come back to us with proposed options.
Yes, that there will have to be a meeting date established. That's right. So
Yeah, so it sounds like between the county side and the applicant side, and then the board side itself, so all three parties can't really necessarily pick a date. So what I'd like to do is adjourn this meeting, defer to, accept the deference, adjourn this meeting, and let the county and the applicant come together with some option dates that the county can support, the applicant support, and then we can elect. Or that's kind of how we approach the August one. I mean, we kind of backed our way into, we let them kind of decide, and they came back with the dates established here. I kind of like to do the same thing versus us dictating that we're going to come back on the 29th. The counties already tell us they're not available.
Yeah.
We don't know the room's available. We don't know.
I think the best way to manage that is if the motion is to defer to a specially called meeting to be coordinated with the applicant, the county, and the board members. Then we'll notice that as a specially called meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals, as opposed to trying to continue a meeting to a certain time.
We have at least one board member that will honestly try to be here, but needs to know the date that we're going to set so they can be.
So I would recommend that the motion be to postpone consideration of this matter to a specially called meeting to be coordinated with the county and the applicant.
Yeah. And you said it has to be at least 3 days beforehand that all the notices go out?
A specially called meeting has different rules, but we would look to notice it consistent with a regular meeting or far in advance of that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Just the opportunity to be able to schedule it.
Is there a motion?
Whether or not they're in agreement with that, I'm sorry, but if they're not, then we have trouble for the time. So I think it's important that they state on the record that they are in agreement. Referring to a specially called meeting at some point in time.
That we can all agree on, including them.
If you could approach the microphone just so it's on. This board is going to either defer at your request, and I understand that you may not feel it is an entirely voluntary request based on the discussions, but we'll need something to say that it is a request to defer, or else this board needs to take a vote up or down on a variance application.
I request to defer.
Okay. I just want to be clear. Thank you.
To an unspecified but negotiable date.
Yes, with a negotiable date.
Is there a motion along those lines?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we defer a vote on this variance until a meeting can be coordinated in a future date that meets both board, county, and applicant schedules.
Second the motion.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. There being
Mr.
one
Chairman,
more point to be made.
well, just for clarification, at the last deferral, you gave us a specific charge to work with them to find some middle ground. Is there a specific charge or direction on staff and or the applicant's behalf, or do we just defer to a date and just come back and continue the discussion?
That's a very good point. Now, what I handed them was what was part of the original motion with constraints. they will need to present that to you, and you will need to be able to convey that that is indeed enforceable, whether or not it crosses the line. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
Can we have one meeting, please?
And Mr. Chair, did we come to an agreement whether we expect the engineer to be here or not, or?
The engineer, I have two engineers
Oh,
here.
their engineer,
They're-
the applicant engineer.
Engineer? Oh, okay. Okay.
We don't know.
I didn't know
We
when I
don't-
heard engineer.
Yeah,
I have two professional engineers. I just know
Right.
he was a professional engineer. So I want to make sure it's not, I don't want to confuse.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
But from the applicant side, they had asked whether we expected their engineer to be at here or not, because
I don't know that we need the applicant's engineer. We need you to convey that what they convey is enforceable.
yes.
And they need to convey what we proposed earlier so that you can convey to him something that he can hopefully enforce. So where were we? Were we about to take a vote? Or did
We
take a
voted.
vote? And it passed? Thank you.
There's a
Oh, I know where we were. There being no other business, this meeting is over.
Adjourned. Thank you all for coming.